all climate change skeptics, the proof is in. Sea levels are rising globally, and there is 25 years worth of data to back it up. Researchers have collected satellite data from the last 25 years monitoring change in sea levels around the world. They've discovered that sea levels have indeed increased by 7 centimeters across the world. Now, the normal accepted rate of rise in sea level is 3 millimeters per year. But according to this latest study, which was published by the National Academy of Sciences, sea level has been rising by at least 0.41 millimeter per year. That's an additional 0.08 millimeter. And while that might sound like a small number to us, the implications are huge. Now, a rise in sea levels will severely affect coastal cities around the world. These storms will get worse. Wetlands will be affected, harming the habitat. Land area of low-lying countries will decrease, forcing people to migrate to other areas. But the bigger question is, why is sea level across the world rising? Well, there are two main reasons behind this. One is thermal expansion. Now, it's a basic concept. As ocean water warms, it expands and sea levels rise. Scientists say man-made global warming has contributed significantly to thermal expansion. The other reason is melting of ice over land, which means as melted ice from Greenland, Antarctica and mountain glaciers flow into the oceans, the sea levels rise. Now, both these causes are accelerated by the rise in temperature across the world, which comes down to the biggest environmental concern facing the world right now, global warming. All right, joining me live from New Delhi is my guest, Dr. Vijeta Rathani, who's a climate analyst, and she's joining us live from New Delhi. Good evening to you. First off, what do you make of this new research which painted an alarming picture?
The report already, it sort of reconfirms the previous established notions that human influence on disrupting our climate and making it climate to change is unequivocal, and it is already happening. It is not something that will happen by the end of century or so, as some researchers might point out, or climate skeptics who believe that climate change is a hoax, like the Trump administration. But this reestablishes that human influence is growing on our climate change, and such more extreme weather events are likely to increase across the world, India being no exception.
So if I understood you correctly, you for one are not at all surprised by the findings of this report. Am I correct?
Yeah, not at all, because, and you will see that every year lot of reports are brought out. The UN emission gap report was brought out in November 2017. IMD came out with its report. WMO came out with its reports, and they all tell us, they all warn us that the amount of carbon in the Earth's atmosphere is at a very dangerous level, and that is causing the climate to change and the temperatures to rise globally, which is causing extreme weather events in the form of floods, in the form of drought, in the form of hurricanes, etc.
For the uninitiated, for those who might be watching you and me this evening, what are the implications of this for the ordinary Indian living anywhere in the country, especially on the coastal areas?
Yes, the coastal areas may be on the slighter, more disadvantage, but if I just tell you some very disheartening facts, that the amount of rainfall has gone down in India, the extent of rain days have decreased in India. So it is just not, the amount of agriculture is affected very badly. Maybe 3 to 4% of our GDP is affected and lost due to climate change impacts, and that is just the picture of India. So it is not just the people living in coastal cities. Of course, the sea level rise and those kind of events have more implications on the coastal communities, but otherwise also, if you see, everyone, each one of us is impacted in some way or the other by climate change, extreme weather events.
Dr. Rathani, what are the, how can we counter or combat this threat, as it were? What are the mitigating circumstances? How do we mitigate this challenge going forward, especially at the level of the government and people at large?
Efforts are already happening, but of course they need to be scaled up. There need to be more awareness, first of all, of climate change and its impacts. It is very saddened to see that developed countries like the US call climate change as hoax and are not doing enough to climate change, addressing it, while developing countries are owning up and they are rising more to the challenge because they are more vulnerable to it. So at government's level, we have the National Action Plan on Climate Change, the State Action Plan on Climate Change, but climate change needs to be mainstreamed into the development agenda and into the main planning process. Plus, we need funds and technology for switching to low carbon scenario, which is not happening at the rate that it should be.
Dr. Rathani, very quickly, we're running out of time. Prime Minister Modi, for one, speaks about climate justice. Now, what might that mean for you as someone who's dealing with the subject for a long, long time now?
India has always invoked this principle of climate justice at international negotiations, which are the COP, as it is called, the Conference of Parties. But India has not been able to provide a proper operationalization solution to how it operationalizes climate justice and how it means to reinforce and implement it. But by the very concept, it means that developed countries should do more to address climate change because they are historically responsible for creating the problem, and should help the needy, the vulnerable countries with funds and technology transfer so that we are able to cope with the impacts of climate change. So that is what is principally meant by the concept of climate justice. But unfortunately, over the years, the negotiations have unfolded. Climate justice has been very, very neglected and marginalized, and developed countries have sort of overshadowed the needs and wills of the developing countries. That is very unfortunate.
Indeed. On that note, Dr. Vijayta Rathani, thank you so much for speaking to me on your story this evening.